Bacchus mixes air hijacks and ancient gods, gangland drama and legends, police procedural and mythic fantasy, swimming pool cleaners and classics. It shouldn't work, of course, and it works like a charm. Eddie Campbell is the unsung king of comic books. The man's a genius, and that's the end to it. Man, that's a pretty good quote. Maybe I should use it for my video. I wonder who said it. Oh God, oh no. Eddie Campbell is an incredibly unique and independent voice in the comic book industry with a perplexing career to boot. The man marched to the beat of his own drum throughout his entire career, going from measly, independent, semi-autobiographical work like Alec, and eventually getting the opportunity to work on Alan Moore's seminal historical drama, From Hell. He famously avoided the superhero comics of the 80s, viewing them as rubbish. Everybody in the 80s knew that it was a wild time for the comic book industry. There was an explosion of self-published creators jumping on the scene, most notably Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird with TMNT. The most important creator during this time period that would later serve as a mentor to Campbell was the totally not controversial Cerberus the Aardvark creator, Dave Sim. He would later convince Campbell to also start self-publishing, but in the 80s, he felt a desire to try to attempt his own American-style comic book with Deadface, better known as Bacchus at Harrier Comics, which was an independent UK publisher that was home to a lot of black and white alternative comic books like Red Fox, Second City, and Conqueror. Eddie Campbell got the inspiration behind the lovable comic from his time doing an informal study of Greek mythology when he was working at a factory. The result was a bizarre combination of meta commentary on stories and how they evolve, outlandish action set pieces, and one thoroughly entertaining ride. A lot of this is due to the fact that Eddie Campbell said by his own admission that he didn't really know where the story was going from page one, and a lot of improvisation was involved. The premise involves a certain number of Greek figures surviving into the modern age, with it centering around Bacchus, the god of wine and fertility. With the gods still existing, this naturally means a lot of their unfinished business with each other is also still kicking. It might sound like a pretty easy comic to get into, but it kind of throws the reader for a loop, as much as your time will be spent reading stories of backstories that involve Greek mythology and characters recounting other types of stories. It's more of a subversion. The meat and potatoes of Bacchus lies in its meta-commentary on stories as a whole. There's a discussion in Bacchus about how these myths are formed and how they change based on who's telling them. Bacchus's segments of the stories are intentionally mundane in the sense that it shows how bland immortality can be. In Bacchus, immortality is not really seen as a positive part of the gods' lives. It's a mockery of the absurdity of sprawling adventures while still having one. Most of them end up leading pretty troubled lives due to years of tragedy. Some characters have to go through absurd lengths just to keep themselves immortal. That's not to say it's completely bereft of action, because it also cycles through story beats with two characters named Joe Theseus and my personal favorite character, Eyeball Kid, and they get into the strangest battles I've ever seen. Joe Theseus was once a mighty son of Poseidon, responsible for slaying the Minotaur. In the modern age, he's become nothing more than a washed-up gangster who's embittered by his harsh life. By the end of the story, he turns into a sympathetic figure as you see how much immortality has weighed on him. He's lived a life full of deaths of the people closest to him. Usually, this is through very unfair consequences, as fate has played him a pretty bad hand. If you would like to support me or this channel, please consider becoming a member today. The lowest tier starts only at 99 cents, and you get early access to my videos, badges, and even member-exclusive videos. You can support this channel also by visiting my Redbubble link down below and buying some of the art that I make. You could print it on shirts, stickers, or even artboards. Thank you. He's the most traditional Greek figure in the story, including the doomed hero angle. Eyeball Kid is just, well, he's just unhinged, and he adds an element of chaos to the story. Both of them, in my opinion, are actually more compelling than Bacchus because he's largely a passive protagonist. Most of the time, Bacchus isn't really interacting with the other characters, but each one of them has a very fun design, and Campbell is clearly having a blast with drawing them. Although, I don't think it was probably much fun for him to draw Eyeball Kid's 10 sets of eyes every time. Eddie Campbell's art is also very unique, just like his writing style. I don't mean to sound shallow, but I am, because the artwork is pretty much what made me interested in the comic. His art style is the perfect combination of sketchy and abstract that just scratches my brain in all the right areas. Eddie Campbell's range is impressive. Bacchus's design has such a cool and mysterious vibe surrounding him, and then you jump to things like Eyeball Kid, and the absolute absurdity of it all is taken to the max. Nobody in this comic book industry draws like Eddie Campbell, because he takes a lot more influence from impressionists and people with more liberated penmanship. Sometimes he also combines real photos into his artwork, which gives it a more surreal feeling. Now, because of all these eccentric traits that come along with Bacchus and the unstable nature of independent comic book publishing, this would cause Bacchus to have a pretty troubled publishing history. A lot of the earlier pieces would be spread out amongst multiple publishers like Harrier, Trident, and even Dark Horse. On top of that, some of the initial outlets went bankrupt like Harrier in 1989. This led to an odd split where Bacchus's story was ongoing in one publication and Joe Theseus and Eyeball Kids were going on in another. This eventually led to Eddie Campbell turning to self-publication until he came into partners with Big Shelf Production to put out some omnibuses. That's the method that I've been using to read these, but they seem increasingly hard to come by if you are interested in picking them up. The back and forth of the story might annoy some people, but I think it gives the comic book brevity. When you're getting tired of Eyeball Kid and Theseus's antics, you go right back to where Bacchus left off. You might think that going from plots involving body part traffickers having mob disputes to Bacchus's self-indulgent bar tales would be difficult, but thanks to the quirks Campbell gives them, it's a joy to read. One of my personal favorite arcs with Bacchus is featured in the King Bacchus storyline. This sees Bacchus elected as a king of some bar which is reclaimed as a castle for his followers. He ends up disappearing for a while, which causes some of his followers to panic and try to invent a new Bacchus called Bacchus Year One. There you can see a lot of poking fun at American-style comic books, and it's doing a bit of deconstructions with superheroes with a bit of tongue-in-cheek. Eddie Campbell famously avoided the commercial superhero landscape as he deemed it too repetitive. He did, in fact, love Alan Moore's Watchmen and brought it up in Alec as the lone superhero comic that he actually respected. Not only that, but in the arc they employ help from a certain Hellspawn to help make Bacchus's Year One more convincing. The storyline serves as a satire of the comic book industry as a whole. You have Bacchus stripped of all his substance and replaced by a shallow but muscular version of himself. And Neil Gaiman essentially acts as a mythographer that attempts to reboot Bacchus's history into a trendy modern format. Myths are reconstructed and packaged to the modern audiences instead of being told organically or lived. King Bacchus once again demonstrates how absurd power is, as he's not really fit for that kind of position of power. Instead of the all-knowing and mighty images gods are often associated with, we get an aging drunkard. Eddie Campbell pretty much just wrote whatever he felt like with Bacchus and made him into his own mouthpiece for whatever he felt like talking about when writing. He even has his own villains that are stand-in for capitalism. The Telcalines are a group of opportunistic assholes that are looking to exploit anyone they can and leech off of. Even the most powerful characters in the story can't escape their lives as mundane people, but when you look at Bacchus, he serves as a counterculture icon when he indulges in wine and anarchy. I won't spoil the ending of Bacchus because most of you probably haven't even heard of it, but it's surprising to say the least. It's a lot more bittersweet and reflects on Eddie Campbell's own mental state as he dealt with publishing these comics. The whole prison setting that Bacchus finds himself in could be compared to the confinement of self-publishing. Bacchus really teaches us how much of a struggle it is to try and make independent comic books. There were a total of 104 pieces that had to be put together for this publication that were split up all over the place. Even with all the effort Eddie Campbell managed to put into the project Bacchus, it largely goes ignored by the comic book community. You take something that is so abnormal like Bacchus and try to put it into an environment that's largely filled with mundanity that is the comic book industry. Regardless, I am very glad Eddie Campbell felt dedicated enough to actually finish Bacchus. The first issue was released all the way back in 1987, and it took until 2001 to complete. A lot of creators would have given up at that point, but Eddie Campbell thought that his philosophical, mythological, meta gangster story was worth telling, and it absolutely was.